there's so many universes now.
Oh
Because
yeah.
now, like talking about the Winchesters, the supernatural verse is back on the CW.
And we can finally talk about it.
Finally, it's exciting because I know for me, Walker Independence is like was the most anticipated, and it's the one that I feel like in my heart of hearts is my favorite. But if we're like to do objective over subjective, the Winchesters is it. Like the Winchesters is the show of, dare I say, 2022-2023 season.
I
I'm
mean,
with you.
yeah, you'll be hard pressed to get an argument from us. I'm thinking about everything we said in our spoiler-free review, and I just feel like all I really want to say right now is double down on it. I've seen this pilot so many times. You both know you've seen it as well, and it's so much fun, and it's, of course, there's darkness in it, but it feels like such like a light, nostalgic, enjoyable TV series. um it's of course it's a love letter to the supernatural fans, but at the same time it's something old but something new. It does so much we know from the modern CW, but at the same time it pays so much tribute to the WB shows of old. It's I'm trying to think of the right word to describe it, and the word Reed used earlier comes to mind: cozy. I love this kind of show. This is my kind of comfort show, and I really think I'm going to keep getting attached to the characters, the stories throughout it. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even talked about the pilot this time, but yeah, what a ride! What a ride!
And
I
it's
love
so
it so
interesting.
much.
It's so good. And like the changes they made from like the screeners that we saw to what actually aired. It was so interesting this time around, seeing the way certain scenes fit together better. I did not expect to be going so hard for John and Mary out the gate.
Right out of the gate, yeah.
I mean, it's like right in front of our faces, right? Like we're supposed to ship them, but I was like, you're right. I wasn't expecting to like feel that connection to them right from like their first scene together.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that their first scene together is them in front of the movie theater talking about licorice drops and him being back in town for the first time in like years. And I was like, this is very cute. And there was an instant attraction and connection that just follows you all the way through the episode. And I'm on board. Like for them individually and together, I'm incredibly on board.
Meg and Drake have such good chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
And I love that scene so much because he was just off. He was just back in town looking for that purpose, but at the same time, she wasn't looking for a distraction. And just for those like couple of minutes, they just found each other, and it set up this like infectious dynamic that you couldn't help but watch them and ship them and root for them throughout the remainder of the episode. And chemistry, absolutely off the charts right from the beginning.
It's so funny too, because it feels like their purposes are so similar, but their motives are different. Like Mary's like, I need to get out of this. I'm like over this. I'm gonna do this one last thing, find my dad, get up out of here, move on with my life. And he's like, this is what I was here for. This is my legacy. He's got like these starry eyes and she's very jaded. And I love seeing how that brings them together, where she's kind of like, oh my God, he's so annoying. And he's like, oh my God, she's really cool.
I love that because, well, one, it's as you said, Michael, infectious dynamic, but two, it's centered on them looking for their fathers or what their fathers were up to, and they're coming from it from different perspectives. Like Mary knows her dad, like so there is an irritation there about the way that he ran off and just left her, and that's not what you're supposed to do. And then with John, he doesn't know his dad because he left, so like he can paint the picture however he wants. And so the little tidbits he gets, especially from oh, what is her name? The lady who was the not pawn shop, bookshop, occult bookshop.
Ada?
Ada. Yeah. So when she tells him like about how kind his dad was, it had a nice smile. I was like, see that those little tidbits of information allow John to like build his dad up without actually having to confront the notion of, yeah, but he left.
Mm-hmm.
Which
you saw that through John, wasn't it? When was he looking at the picture of him when he was telling Mary what his dad used to say to him when he was a kid. You see that like warmth in them that Mary kind of doesn't have, obviously, because she said it lived a very different life than he did.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that he's not resentful to his dad, and he clearly loves his father. But I was like, how long is this? Like, I'm a golden retriever. This is a wonderful exploration of what my father was up to. Like, how long is that going to last? I do wonder because he's like, he was just trying to protect us, and I was like, okay, but he still left your mom and you. Like, I really want you to sort of dig into that notion. But I don't know.
I think, at least I hope, or I can see this happening. Mary will kind of help him unpack those feelings that he maybe doesn't quite have access to because he has kind of rose-colored glasses on because he's like, oh, this whole new world, monsters, and where's my dad? I want to know him. And I think it'll be an interesting character arc for John, and also um, a great performance for Drake to go through that, the peaks and valleys of John figuring out who he is, where he came from, and why he's been put in this world.
Mhm.
So yeah, I hope we get some of those deep conversations from John and Mary about their dads because they have a lot in common, even though it's the circumstances are different.
And it's lovely that they have a lot in common because it allows them to connect instantly. I do like she is sort of like annoyed with him, but fondly. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
fond annoyance. Like I think she likes how much light he has in him. Which I don't know much about John Winchester, but I have seen the comments on Twitter and from Drake's own interviews that light does not necessarily exist when he becomes when he is older. So I'm not excited to see it go.
No, like I don't want him to get hardened and like Jay did.
I know. Having recently watched The Walking Dead, it's hard to see Jeffrey Dean Morgan as anything other than the villainous Negan. But Jeffrey Dean Morgan did play some nicer characters over the years. But I can say that John Winchester kind of walked that line between doing the right thing but not being the best father. So even though he's not exactly a heroic character, but he is the boys' hero in Supernatural, it's still very hard to imagine Drake Rogers, John Winchester ever getting to that point. But I think that's also one of the most exciting things about the show and why I hope it runs for a long time. How do you get from A to B? Where does the story go? How does I'm not going to say John turn into Mary because Mary very much has a hardened view of the world. And I think the thing that she likes the most about John is that he doesn't. But we know how their story ends and that John Winchester does get something of a hardened view about the world. And I think I'm really excited to see how that plays out over the course of however many seasons the Winchesters has.
I want to circle back to their relationship and talk about a scene that we were talking about while the episode is airing. It was when they're going to wherever the whole gang is going to. I don't even know how to explain what happened in the climax of the show. But they're in the van and they get there, and Latika, is that how you pronounce your name?
Mhm.
She is like nervous. She's timid about like becoming a hunter. She doesn't have a lot of confidence. And John's the one that kind of, he's got that sparkle in his eye and he relates to her and holds his hand out for her. And the scene that we talked about and clung on to was when Mary looks back and notices this happening. And we were like, are we setting up a love triangle? Like, because Mary definitely like clocked it. Um, but I told you guys I had a different reading of that scene
Yes.
and I want to get into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I rewatched the scene and I think there's two shots of Mary seeing. And at the very end, she kind of like grins when she sees John help Latika like join them. And in my reading, I'm like, she's endeared to him, like being the
Mhm.
person that can relate to people or like just to see his personality like that. I think in my eyes, I was like, oh, she's like, and that's something that's gonna help like Mary fall in love with him. But I could also see the other option where it's like the beginnings of a love triangle where because we've seen this so many times where there's a guy that like connects with a woman and she is kind of like taken with him. I could see Latiga having a crush on him,
Mhm.
but I feel like we're not going to get a ton of red herring relationships. What do you guys think?
I don't think so either. There's also another reading for that scene because I think Mary clocks him in the library too when they're talking, and John introduces himself to Latta. They call her Latta, which I love that nickname. But she sees that, and then the one that you mentioned, Reed, and so I'm like, if she does smile a bit, would she be more comfortable with him developing a relationship with somebody else because she knows she was always going to leave, but like she also knows that like the life of a hunter is hard, and it's not clear how long Lotta might stick around even though she wants to hunt. She doesn't have the alpha mentality that like Carlos and Mary have. Like she's in the game, but we don't know how long she's really going to stick around if she can't get over her fear of these missions. And those two, I mean, they're very sweet. They could be very sweet if given the opportunity. So perhaps she'd be like for him to get into a relationship with somebody else and not take the pressure off of her, but like there's something about Mary that feels like she's gonna die in like a day. Like she's always got like death hanging on by her side, and she knows it, and so she wouldn't want to get involved with anybody.
Yeah, and maybe seeing him in a relationship with somebody else would be like the thing that would be like, oh, wait, I liked him. Why did I push him away or something?
Mm-hmm.
You do see that sometimes that the more closed off characters then have like a moment later down the line where they regret a decision they made when it came to love in the past. In fact, we see it in Nancy Drew actually at the moment, and we're watching it. I mean, drop that reference. But yeah, I'm conflicted. I do think I love the fact that the pilot episode brought all of this up, and it particularly stood out to us because we weren't familiar with that scene beforehand. And I love that it brought all of that up because there are multiple avenues it could go, and I'm glad we don't know which one it's going to go right out of the gate. The interesting thing about a show like this is we do know where the avenue is going to lead. We just don't know how it's going to get there. On one hand, I'm like, yeah, John and Latta could be a nice relationship, but on the other hand, I'm like, history is not on this girl's side. Why put her through this? So you know what I mean? It's like it's hard to have a fully formed opinion on it right now, but I will say that I do like the idea of any of the potential avenues it could take. I'm just going to be very intrigued to see which one it does, because we know the end game here already.
There's so many questions and questions I didn't even realize, like where in the timeline is Dean? What universe is this? We found out about the supernatural multiverse, which don't come for us supernatural fans. We just did not know.
We're having a crisis of infinite Deans.
We are, which I mean, if the solution is that they're a part of one of these multiverses, it does leave open the opportunity for John and Mary to get some kind of a happy ending. Because when we started I feel like everyone who knows what happens to Mary entered this series, wondering where we're gonna end. Like, it will be just before Dean is born. Will that be like the last moment of the series, or will they flash us forward to what happened? And so, if it's an alternate universe, you don't even have to do any of that. Like we can have a somewhat happy ending. I say somewhat because it's still a supernatural show, and therefore happy ending likely not happening. Like, it's not like Mary's gonna pull out of hunting and so is John, and then we're gonna live happily ever after in some Kansas suburban town house. Like, that's not happening. But
I mean, if there is a multiverse, they can establish it and they could like see the different outcomes or something. I mean, Riverdale did it. They could definitely do it.
That's true.
It would be interesting because it would be really interesting. I'm going to use the word interesting because I don't want to have an opinion on this right away, but it would be interesting if like they were the Winchesters of this universe and they did get to retire, because that line was it that Carlos said that really stuck with John was it the only thing worse than how a hunter starts is how a hunter ends. And obviously it suggests that even for the great Sam and Dean, there were dark days ahead. And so, of course, we already know there are dark days ahead for the great John and Mary, but it would be really, if they decided to go the alternate universe route, it would be really cool if in this universe, they were the legendary Winchesters. They got to retire. They got to buck the trend and then raise Sam and Dean as a happy family with no hunting. Probably won't happen because it's a supernatural show. But I feel like if it went to supernatural, right, and it was willing to take all the risks of jumping through universes and telling a different story, why not go the whole way and end differently? It's like, for example, we thought Gotham when it started was going to be a very straightforward Batman story, and then around season 2 the writers just said, you know what, let's just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks, and now it's not considered canon in the slightest.
Was there a multiverse?
I don't think so. That's one of the things. That's one of the things they actually steered clear from. I wonder if it's because the Arrowverse shows were doing at the time, but it's considered somewhere out there in the DC multiverse. It's just not the main universe because the timeline's all over the place. You had like 10 Batman villains surface before Batman was even a thing, even though it's supposed to be Batman's creation that leads to these villains. So it would just, if they were willing to do that, who knows, maybe some point down the line, the Winchesters could go, let's not be bogged down by canon and tell our own story. It's a fine line. A lot of shows, for example, get it wrong when they decide to do that. But at the same time, it can loosen the shackles and then add a bit more creative freedom. So it would be really cool if the Winchesters did decide to do that. And I think I'm happy with it sticking with canon for now. But if they decided to step away from canon, simply only to give these characters a happy ending, knowing how on board we are with the ship right from the off, I would absolutely sign up for that.
That'd be interesting because it's going to be dark anyway. What were you going to say, Reed?
I was going to say we've been promised some answers in this first season by the showrunner. So, I mean, we're going to find out where we are, who we are, when we are.
As you know, they grow closer. And I told you this already. I need one of them to go feral, like completely losing it. like because of something that happens, whether it's a kidnapping, a demon possession. Like I want full on like this swinging have to be dragged away, like sort of feral behavior. Like just I love when ships do that, and so I need it. like
oh yeah, it has to happen at some point. We hopefully have seasons of this. It has to happen.
So great pilot episode. I can't wait for episode 2. I really like this. I'm just gonna call them Scooby Gang. I really like this Scooby Gang. I love Latta. I love that she's sort of the one who still has a lot to learn, while Carlos is irreverent and knows exactly what he wants to be doing. Not necessarily someone you can count on as far as arriving on time, but he will save you.
in an excellent fashion, and in a memorable one as well.
Yes. That peel out for the van where he just pops out and takes care of that demon. He's excellent. I love him. And that he has like a crush on Mary, but he's also scared of her. Like that's a funny dynamic.
I know she loves it. That's where she likes them.
Yes. And then Ada's going to be interesting because she has the most answers compared to everybody else.
I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing how she plays into the show, because she was very much the character that needed saved from the beginning. So they could have just moved on from that character afterwards if they wanted to. But now you see that she has so much knowledge that could help both John and Mary perhaps connect with their parents, whether that means in real life or just like by addressing the past. And I think she also strikes me like she could potentially be like a Giles character from Buffy, someone with all of this knowledge that they just go to. I feel like because of her antique store, because of her reading up, her knowledge already, the fact that John and Mary's, which one was it? One of their fathers went to her for advice and she helped them figure out the first demon or whatever. And she knew about the Akrita as well, which is our big bad that we know nothing about yet. I feel like she could very much play a Giles role. And the fact that we didn't get to see that in the first episode makes me excited for however she will play it in the episodes ahead.
Very much so. This is it's good to come off of a first episode of a brand new series and have so many questions and also be secure in the notion that they will be answered. So there's so much they can do in this 13 episode season. And so I cannot wait to find out more, especially because based on the first look images and the trailer, we're hippies. for some reason on what
Oh,
looks like
I'm
a
so
commune.
excited. I'm so excited.
We're in for an adventure, and I don't just mean episode 2.
Yes, we are.